So welcome to our K-3 year-long learning journey. We know many of you guys are going to be joining us after a long day in the classroom, and we're so grateful that you came and have worked to make sure that our webinar is worth your time and hopefully gives you some helpful information today. So we're in the middle of our year-long journey and just finished a few sessions on phonemic awareness. Today, we're going to be introducing systematic and explicit phonics instruction. So if you're joining for the first time, welcome. And if you've attended previous sessions, welcome back. I see that we've had some more people share where they're from. We have some participants from Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, Georgia. Welcome. We're so excited to have you guys here today. So before we dive in to our topic, we want to tell you a little bit more about the work that we do and who we are. The Atlanta Speech School is the center of our operation, and the speech school where we work serves many different students with different learning needs, but the focus is always on language and literacy. So our work at Rollins is to lift up many of the practices that are done at the speech school and share them with the community at large through trainings and free online resources through our online Cox Campus. And we believe that access to these trainings and materials do not belong behind a paywall and that every student has the right to read. So now that we've told you a little bit about our work, we want to take a minute to introduce ourselves. My name is Alistair Smick. I am a teacher first. I have also worked as a researcher, as a literacy coach, and as a reading specialist. This is my 6th year at the Atlanta Speech School, and like we talked about just on the previous slide, I actually worked for another division or subset of the speech school, Wardlaw, that was a school for students with dyslexia and language-based learning disabilities as a reading specialist before I came to Rollins. And now I'm working as a content developer and instructional designer to make some of the courses that you see on Cox Campus. My passion really started working with emergent readers and dyslexic learners. And my free time, I do enjoy hiking and reading and spending times with friends and family, but usually it consists of being outside and chasing around my daughter and dog. So now I'm going to hand it quickly to my co-facilitator, the wonderful McKinney, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is McKinney Coleman, and just to give you a little background about myself, I have taught kindergarten and first grade for 7 years, and for 5 years, I was a reading instructional coach, and I have been at Rollins for about, I think it's like 6 years now, 6 or 7 years, and this is my passion. Reading and literacy is my passion, and I'm currently, just like Alistair is, an instructional designer and content developer here. So some of the courses that you'll see online for K-3, I've helped to create, and I'm excited to be here with you today. And we designed this session to be as interactive as possible, even though it's virtual. So we may be calling on some people for you to share your wonderful ideas with us. And you will also partake in several engaging activities. And if you have any questions, please drop them in that chat, and our lovely moderator will do her best to answer. And she's about to introduce herself in the next slide.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anisha Donald, and I am a content creator and instructional designer at the Rollins Center. And as McKinney said, I will be in the chat helping to answer any questions that you all may have, and it's great to see everyone today.
All right, so now that we've introduced ourselves, we want to get to know a little bit more about you. So we're going to be releasing a poll that asks 3 questions. The first, we want to know if you're a Cox Campus member, that online learning platform. Maybe you're a veteran, maybe you've never accessed it before. We also want to know what your role in education is, what best describes your role. And finally, if you have logged on to Cox Campus, have you taken our systematic and explicit phonics course that we'll be talking about today? So just take a minute and respond to the poll. And Anisha and McKinney, if you can help, tell me what you see as we get some results in. Well, if you are one of those people who commented that you have not used Cox Campus before, we want to make sure that we can get you on Cox Campus with all of our resources. Like we said, the best part about Cox Campus is that everything is free. We have tons of resources, we have courses, we have assessments, we have different resources that you can be using to lesson plan in your classroom, and we'll share some of those resources with you today. It does not take long, so we're going to drop that link in the chat. Thank you, Anisha. And if you want to sign up for a membership at Cox Campus, please join us. All right, so if you've joined us for some of our previous sessions, we mentioned earlier that we've been talking about phonemic awareness. So today it is exciting because we are going to be starting to talk about systematic and explicit phonics instruction. We will be continuing this series in the next few sessions. Our goals for our session today are to define phonics instruction, explore some myths and facts about phonics instruction, and to identify characteristics of systematic and explicit phonics instruction. I think we had a little ghost on our screen there for a second. So hopefully you find this session today informational and can take some things away for your own instruction in the classroom. So let's go ahead and start with a little activity. I want you to use this question, what is phonics? And complete the sentence, phonics is, in the chat. So when you hear the word phonics, what does it make you think of? How do you define phonics? Hearing sounds or letters, study of sounds and how they are spelled, letter to sound recognition. Oh, we've got some great participants. Thank you guys for engaging. The ability to make and separate sounds in a word, using sounds and matching those sounds to letters. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide and look at our definition. Thank you, everybody. Phonics is a method of instruction that teaches the relationships between the letters of written language and the sounds of spoken language. So all of you guys were spot on. A misconception around phonics instruction is that phonics is the instruction. So when we're talking about phonics, I think sometimes it's easy to get confused. Decoding is the actual skill, and phonics is the term we use to describe the type of instruction that we're referring to. So now that we've started with our definition, like we said, we want to make the session as engaging as possible. So we're going to start an activity called Myth or Fact. And we're going to share a couple of statements with you. And in the chat, we want you to write if you think it is a myth or if you think it is a fact. So our first one is, it's more effective to teach phonics in an intentionally designed cumulative sequence. So when we're talking about a cumulative sequence, we know that each step builds on each other. So is that a myth or is that a fact? All right, I'm seeing lots of facts, true facts.
This is an engaged group. I love it.
I know, you guys are wonderful. All right, let's reveal. And everybody was correct. So that is a fact. Research has shown that it's effective to teach phonics in a cumulative sequence, so where each element is building on each other. A patchwork approach leaves children or students with gaps. Some of you guys may have had exposure to a curriculum that felt like it was a little bit more of a patchwork approach with the different phonics skills as opposed to teaching it in a sequence. So when students are taught systematically, they're better at reading and writing words and comprehending text. We're going to look at a quick graphic on the next slide. There's no universally set scope and sequence of phonics, but if you've seen different curriculums or been exposed to different scope and sequences, you'll notice that there's a lot of general guidelines that a curriculum should follow. Many of them are things like using high utility sounds or spellings first. So introducing M before S or Z before X. progressing from simple to more complex spelling. So you're going to introduce S before you introduce the digraph SH. Introducing short vowels early so words can be read as early as possible. If you're going to introduce your short E sound before you introduce long E so that students can be decoding words as soon as possible. And we also want to separate letters with similar shapes and sounds. I'm sure you have had exposure to students who may struggle with reversals like B, D, P, and Q. We want to separate those when we're introducing them in our phonics scope and sequence. All right, let's move on to our next one. So myth or fact, only a few students in a typical class really need phonics instruction. Only a few students in a typical class typically need phonics instruction. You guys are fast. All right, I'm seeing all myth, all myth. All right, let's reveal on our next slide. You are correct, it is a myth. 60% of students need explicit and systematic phonics instruction to learn to read proficiently. The remaining 40% benefit from this form of instruction. So if we go to our next slide, we have a graphic from Nancy Young, her ladder of reading graphic. And this graphic actually emerged from the myth that structured literacy and phonics instruction was only beneficial or necessary for some struggling readers. And you may have had exposure to that in your schools or in your classrooms with others telling you that you had students that didn't necessarily need structured literacy, but we know that structured literacy benefits all students in the classroom. All right, we're going to move to our next one. So far, I think every single person's 2 for 2. All right, myth or fact, phonics instruction can include interactive and hands-on activities. So phonics instruction can include interactive and hands-on activities. All right, let's reveal. Everybody's 3 for 3. So learning the tools to unlock the written code is extremely meaningful and motivating. That is a fact. It can be hands-on, it can be enjoyable and interactive. In a few ways, on our next slide, we're going to talk about a few ways to make phonics fun. So one way is that we can use manipulatives. You can use sound boxes and counters. I'm sure many of you guys have used manipulatives in your classrooms. You can add visuals. So when we're talking about sounds and spelling, you can bring in items that begin with that sound and spelling. You can use student names. So acknowledging when students' name have a sound or spelling that you're discussing. Another way that I know I do it in phonics instruction is when we're using our decodable sentences with our phonics skill. A lot of times I'll insert a student name into those sentences, and it's always like, how did the book know my name? But students love to see their name. It makes it engaging. It makes it personal. Acting it out, which we'll talk about a little bit on our next slide, where students are human letters. And then adding brain breaks. So playing, when you're doing a brain break, playing a game like I Spy with the sound spelling. So noticing those sound and spellings in the room, transferring it to other parts of your day. So we can talk quickly about that acted out exercise that we were talking about. I know this slide looks a little silly, but this is an activity that we use in the classroom for chaining. So we're actually going to share in the chat 2 of our free resources from Cox Campus. It explains the chaining instructional activity in the classroom. And then the other one is a list for chaining. So chaining really is when we're talking about decoding words, students practicing decoding words, but just switching one sound. So what this activity might look like in your classroom, we have our lovely models on the screen. You would have your students holding a letter and they would be making words. So you would start, you say you have the word fun, and you have another student holding a paper or a poster with the letter S, and the student with F would move out of the word to create the word sun. And you can engage students in trying to tune into those individual sounds that they're hearing and identifying which letter needs to go in the word to make the new word. So this is a great way to interact and get students excited. All right, let's move on to our next myth or fact. So in phonics, myth or fact, exposure is more important than mastery of phonics skills. Exposure is more important than mastery of phonics skills. Myth or fact? All right, so we have some, I like Katie's response, fact-ish. So we have some mixed responses on this one. Let's go ahead and reveal on the next slide. So it is a myth. Exposure alone does not work. We have to teach to mastery instead. A curriculum is a guide. It's not necessarily a mandate. And I know that this can be tricky when we have so many different students in our classroom. So in order to ensure that students are reaching mastery in each of our skills, we need to use assessments to place the student in the scope and sequence. Remember when we're talking about our scope and sequence being cumulative, that means that each step builds on the next step. So if your student has exposure, but not necessarily mastery, that's going to continue to create problems as these skills are building on each other. So we use assessments to place them, and then we adapt, place them where they are in the scope and sequence, and then we have to adapt our curriculum to our students' needs. So on our next slide, we have two images of two of the different phonics assessments that we offer on Cox Campus, and we'll also be posting those in the chat for you. Like we said, assessments are a critical part of phonics instruction. We need to know where students are. In a perfect world, all of our students would enter the classroom on grade level, but we know even when students are on grade level, they can have different areas of strengths and need and different phonics skills. And based on that assessment data that you gather from your students, you'll know who needs the extra support, and you'll know which skills specifically they need practice with. So we want to be very intentional and diagnostic in our phonics instruction. All right, let's go ahead and move to the next myth or fact. So good phonics instruction includes reading strategies like guessing words based on the first letter and looking at illustrations. All right, I see some quick responses already. All right, lots of myths. Let's go ahead and reveal on the next slide. So it is a myth. These practices are rooted in the 3 cueing system. Many of you may be familiar with that 3 cueing system in our running records and those practices. And skilled readers, we know, need to decode every single word they read. So when we're talking about guessing versus decoding, guessing explains why some of our students in the younger grades may present as more advanced readers until they are getting into print that's only the text. So when you take away the picture and they've been guessing from that context, they're not receiving the support that they need anymore. So they might be able to read the correct word correctly on one page when they have the picture support, and when the context or the picture changes, these are the students that all of a sudden can't decode the word anymore. And once these students continue to progress into more and more complex text without that visual support of the picture, they start falling behind. They can't decode some of the longer words because they haven't developed those strong decoding skills from phonics instruction. So we want our students to have mastery of the system so that they can experience success when they get in more and more complex text. All right, I'm going to check our time really quick because I want to make sure that we have enough time for our other activities with our myth and facts. And I think we have time for one more myth or fact. So our final one is phonics instruction should focus only on individual words and patterns. So when you're teaching phonics, this statement is saying you only focus on the word and the pattern of the word, nothing else. All right, I see lots of myths. Great. Let's go ahead and reveal on our next slide. So it is a myth. Phonics instruction is most effective when students apply these skills to reading and writing connected text. So we don't want just those word patterns. We want to also talk about, have students exposed to these and transferring them to other contexts of a sentence or a passage. The text that students are reading, though, should relate to the sounds and spellings that they were already previously taught. So when decodable texts are provided in a set sequence that is mirroring your scope and sequence, because remember, these skills are cumulative, and we don't want to present students in a connected text with something that they haven't been exposed to before. The same goes with writing. And if you continue on in our series, in some future sessions, we'll talk a little bit more what that looks like in a model phonics lesson. All right, so we're going to go ahead and skip to reflect a little bit on some of our myths and facts. I know that we had quite a few myths and facts here, but we want to know which myth or fact resonated with you the most. Have you encountered any of these in your own teaching experiences? So maybe did you have someone share with you that some students didn't necessarily need structured literacy? Another thing I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to share is when we were talking about how phonics can be hands-on and engaging. If anybody has an activity that they've seen that made phonics really hands-on and engaging to share with everybody else, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, this is Katie. Can you guys hear me?
Hi, Katie.
Hey, I really loved the talk about having your phonics skills being taught using manipulatives and games and things like that. I find that with a lot of my students, the more kinesthetic learners really enjoy so much having the opportunity to link words together with blocks and build them out, or use Elkonin boxes and actually spell them in the box and then wipe them off, or letter chaining. They just really enjoy that so much. We play a lot of games, especially on Fridays when we've finished a skill. They just have such a blast. I do too, honestly.
Right? We do too when we play the games. No, I completely agree with you. And I think exposure and sharing those ideas and talking about it is so helpful, because the scope and sequence is just the starting point. And like you were saying, a skilled teacher like yourself that can create games and make phonics engaging for students, we know that it can be hands-on and it can be fun. It doesn't necessarily need to be limiting.
I just want to add to that, Alice, there.
Yeah.
And I think one of the myths, to me, that was one of the big myths that I think we want to bust, is because, you know, I'm sure many people have heard, oh, phonics is so boring. The kids are just bored. And what you said, Katie, you can make it exciting for the kids where they're looking forward to doing phonics instruction.
I see Twyla shared in my curriculum, it has letter tiles and syllable boards. Yep. The students love the syllable boards. Some of them called them the baby whiteboards. They love writing on them. Oh, great. Carol shared a website with some engaging activities for phonics instruction. Before we move on, does anybody else have a quick activity that they have done for phonics instruction in their classroom? I know one activity that I will do in the classroom when we're talking about those decodable sentences for homework, when you're sending home maybe a sheet for them to practice that decoding at home with sentences, sending home an activity sheet. So after each sentence they read, they have to do an activity. So with the sentence. So in one time during Halloween, they had to read a sentence in like a scary monster voice, or different things like that. Just anything to switch it up and make it engaging, and students love that.
I have one more, Alice, there. It's a play on like the one we saw with the kids actually moving. It's having a white board and doing it called quick erase, where you write a word on the board and then you erase one letter and then change it, and then they have to read the word again, and you erase another one, and then so you can change all the positions and make new words, and they like that too because it was quick.
Oh, I love that. Just kind of a chaining activity, the whiteboard. That's great. I love that. All right, so now we're going to quickly move to our next slide and talk through characteristics of systematic and explicit phonics instruction. And remember, we warned you that it was going to be, we had some activities for you today and it was going to be engaging. So you want to pay close attention. All of you guys did awesome on our myths and facts section. So when we're talking about some of these characteristics, they will come up in the next activity that we're doing. So now that we've talked a little bit about phonics instruction and the myths around it, we want to just highlight what exactly does effective phonics instruction look like. So explicit instruction, we know that the concepts are clearly explained. So students do not have to infer or guess what you're talking about. You're being very clear, very explicit in the rules. You're modeling the skills for your students so they can see it explained clearly and then modeled in front of them. There's no vagueness or ambiguity about the expectations. Students know exactly what they are expected to do, and all of us know that that sets our students up for success, not just in phonics, but in other areas in the classroom as well. Corrective feedback is given, so students, again, that goes with the guessing piece. It's never vague. They know exactly what they are supposed to do, and they get that immediate feedback as they're practicing the skill. We also want our instruction to be systematic. So teaching sound spelling relationships in that logical sequence that builds on each other, and teaching to mastery before moving on to the next skill, like we talked about in the myths and facts section. It reinforces the alphabetic principle. The newly introduced skills are built on the existing skills, and those tasks are arranged from simplest to complex. So that goes back to, you're going to introduce S before you introduce the digraph SH. We want to start simple and get more complex as students master those skills, and always go back to revisit the previous skills so that we're ensuring our students continue to build upon the skills that they have mastery at and they're not forgetting or not using them. All right, so now that we've shared, I'm gonna hand it over to McKinney for our next activity.
All right, here we're going to tag team right now. Let's give a round of applause to Alice. She did such a great job. Let me see if I
had the best audience ever. Thank you guys.
All right, so for this activity, like Alice has said, if you paid attention to the characteristics, and we'll have them again to pop up, so don't worry just yet. So what we're going to do right now is we are going to make pretend that we are choosing a phonics curriculum for our school. Okay, so you're going to examine several curriculums that we have, just little like blurbs that we have about them, and you're going to make recommendations as to whether we need to keep this on the shelf and look at it some more, or can we just throw this curriculum to the side, okay? Because we don't want to waste those school dollars. So first, we're going to do an example together because, we're following I do, we do, you do. So watch as I do the example. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, and so let's go ahead and begin. So this is our curriculum. Okay, so this curriculum, if I'm just reading about it, it starts by teaching children a sight word reading vocabulary of about 50 to 100 words. And then afterwards, children have to memorize these. After they've memorized the sight words, they'll begin to receive instruction in the alphabetic principle. Okay, so I'm going to use these guiding questions kind of to help me figure out, is this going to be a curriculum that I'm going to recommend to my leadership team or not? So let's look at the guided questions. Okay, so I need to think about, is this curriculum explicit and or systematic? What makes it explicit? What makes it systematic? And why is this curriculum not either one? Okay, so looking at the next slide, I kind of created a little table just of what Alistair talked about earlier, right? So remember what we said. We said explicit means the concepts are clearly explained, skills are clearly modeled, there's no vagueness or ambiguity, a corrective feedback is given, okay? And then we can say it's systematic if it's taught, the sound spellings are taught in a logical sequence, there's reinforcement of the alphabetic principle, new skills are built on existing skills, and tasks are arranged from simplest to complex. So if I'm looking at this, I'm going to say, I don't want to recommend this to my leadership team. And the reason I'm not going to recommend it is because they're telling me that the kids have to master these sight words first before they can move on to beginning to learn about the alphabetic principle. And to me, that means that it's not systematic. Okay, so what you're going to do in this, what you're going to do in the activity is we're going to break out in the breakout rooms. And one group will have me facilitating, and we go to the next slide. One group will have me facilitating and Alistair facilitating, and then you guys are going to have discussions about whether or not we can recommend this phonics program or not to our leadership team. And then when we come back, you guys are going to share out what was the recommendation and why you came to that recommendation. So we're going to have 3 different curriculums that we're going to look at in breakout rooms. You'll decide, do we keep this or not? And then we'll come back and then share out. Okay, so everybody good with that? All right. Hey, everybody. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what everyone said, okay? And we had some great discussions in our room. All right, curriculum 1. Okay, so this curriculum, I'm just going to read it again real quick. This curriculum progresses from simple to more complex sound spellings. For example, short vowels are introduced before vowel digraphs and diphthongs. Okay, what did everybody have? You can just put this in the chat unless someone wants to come out and talk, but you can just put it in the chat. Do we want to keep or do we want to, I'm going to say keep or trash? Keep or trash. What did everybody have? Okay. And can anyone tell me why they wanted to keep? Oh yeah, okay, so let me make it, Katie, you're correct in saying need more info. So let me just tell you, some of these are just quick little blurbs or descriptions of not a whole phonics program, but they're just kind of like little things about it. So anyone tell me why they may want to look at, so we'll say this, do we want to look at this some more? So do we want to look more or do we automatically know we don't want it? Okay, so I see some keeps.
Our group was saying that we wanted
I come
to look.
off mute. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I was saying was our group, which is group 2, the best group,
Oh.
we needed more information about curriculum 1. So we're not going to keep it because it doesn't share what type of resources will be shared. We just know that as educators, we have a lot going on and a lot to do. So we would like for the curriculum to state we'll be able to do these things by whatever. So we just needed more information.
Okay, so, and that's good, because I'll say this, we're going to change it to look more, or just we already know we're going to get rid of this for these, because again, we couldn't put like a whole, like everything that's in the phonics curriculum, but there's some things you may just want to look at some more, because like, okay, this looks promising, but we don't know everything. And then there's something that's like, no, we don't want this at all. So we're going to, so I agree.
Yes, we're considering it. We just need more information.
We need some more. We need some more information.
Group 2 was selective. They were selective. They said, we see that it's systematic, but we don't know. We don't know.
We don't know yet.
A little bit more about it.
I got you. So this one is, we need a little bit more information. But what we do know about this one is that it is progressing from simple to more complex sound spelling. So that's a positive sign. So we're going to look more into this one. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Okay, this curriculum comes with decodable sentences, passages, and books so that students can practice reading words that contain previously taught sound spelling. So do we want to look more into this one, or do we know we want to get rid of this one immediately? Let me see what you have in your comments. Or if anybody wants to come off, let me know. Oh, sounds good so far. It's promising. And I'm going to agree. Okay. And what makes this sound promising? Anyone want to say what makes this sound promising?
I love how Katie said, keep please.
Well, this seems promising. Great. Okay. It has its own decodables and can build upon skills. So this is one thing I was telling my group. One thing that I noticed when I was teaching is sometimes we would get random decodables that were kind of like thought about like, okay, let's just give them some decodables. And sometimes you would notice that it would be sound spellings that were not even taught yet, but because they were decodable, then they would just give like, oh, this is decodable, you can use it. So this program has passages that kind of match what you taught. So it's something to keep looking at. All right, so let's look at the next curriculum. All right, so this curriculum focuses heavily on word meaning based activities. Lessons based on letter sound blending are separated and can be added on as extension activities. What do you guys think about that? Do we want to keep looking into this one, or we know immediately, no, we don't want this one? What do y'all think? I love this guy.
I was about to say, this audience is the best.
Okay, so with this one, and I don't know if you guys have ever kind of seen this as well, is kind of like the curriculum is putting a lot of heavy emphasis on teaching words. Not that they don't, let me be clear, not that we don't want meaning, but a heavy focus is on that. And have you guys ever seen like sometimes where you have books that are so heavy focused on the meaning that the kids can't read it because they haven't learned those spelling patterns or those sound spellings? So it's great to have some of that when they're ready, but if they have not learned those sound spellings and that's not the driving factor of how the curriculum is set up, then we want to pause on that one. Okay.
Our group kind of talked about how you get patchwork a lot of the time and gaps with that because you have a story and it just says, talk about EA pattern when you're reading this, but it's not really the focus or intentional.
Exactly. Okay, now we did not do this one and I'm looking at the time. Okay, so this will be one that I just want you to look at yourselves right now. And then this will be the last one that we do. So we're doing it again. Now this is the you do. Okay, so look at this one, and then I want you to and I'll just read it out loud too. This curriculum includes a range of routines for teachers to model and practice with their students. There are routines for phonemic awareness, word blending, and dictation activities. So I'll just read that out loud. I see, sounds good. All right, so we want to look more into this one. And can anybody tell me what makes this one look promising? All right. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and move to, let me see, I'm sorry, in the chat. Yes, so these are promising, the foundations and basics of teaching, the routines, you model them, so there are routines in them. Great. Great job, guys. Okay, so now we're going to just we're skipping over this one. Let's skip. Okay, all right. So we have a resource that you can print out to help you when you are actually, looking at the phonics program you have currently, or if you're looking to purchase a phonics program and you just want to see what it has first, this is a helpful checklist that you can use. So we just dropped the link in the chat for you guys, and this is also one of the wonderful free resources we have on Cox Campus. Another reason why you should join us on Cox Campus. Okay. All right, so looking at the next slide. Okay, so I just want you guys, we always love to see if we did what we said we were going to do. So at the beginning, Alistair shared some session goals with you. And I just want you to give me just a thumbs up. You can do it like this, or you give the little thumbs up at the bottom. Did we define what phonics instruction was? Did we do that? Okay. Did we explore some myths and facts about phonics instruction? Did we do that? And did we identify characteristics of systematic and explicit phonics instruction? Did we do that? Okay. So we're going to go to the next slide. Okay. So we always love to reflect too. All right. So I'm just going to give you guys maybe about 4 minutes. Let me see the time. Just pick one of these questions that really jumps out to you, and you can either answer in the chat, or you can just take the time to reflect yourself. You don't have to put it in the chat. And we're going to play some relaxing music for you as you answer. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on so we stay on time to the next slide. All right, so you are going to take a little poll right now, because we always want to improve ourselves and we want to know what you thought about this webinar. So we're going to go ahead and drop that link, and we would greatly appreciate it if you can just complete it. It just takes like 1 minute. All right, so if you enjoyed this session, please join us for the next session in March, which we will be talking about phonics, single syllable consonants and vowel spellings, and sound boxes. That's one of the things we talked about earlier, about how to make phonics fun, phonics instruction fun. And if you would like to know more about Cox Campus, you can reach out to us or see more information or content that we have on the following social networks. I think that's what's coming up next. Yep. So we have a Facebook group. We have join us on Twitter, and we have a LinkedIn. And of course, if you are not a member of Cox Campus, I'm going to have Anisha, if you could drop that link to Cox Campus one more time. It's free, y'all. It's free. Come join us. And we have a lot of different courses for K-3 teachers. And I think we are almost right on time. We just have 1 more minute. I'll just go look through the comments right now just to see if anyone has anything else to say.
You guys have been so engaging today. Thank you.
We loved it.
So fun. We had a blast.